We're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone, to the EAN Leveraging Change Speaker Series event on Building for the Future, Challenges and Benefits to Ensuring New Housing in Vermont is Clean, Energy Efficient, Cost-Effective, and Equitable. We added a little equitable on there after our conversation with the panel. For any of you who don't know me, I'm Cara Robicek. I'm the Deputy Director and Network Manager at EAN. And for any of you who don't know much about EAN, a very, very quick synopsis is that EAN is really two things. We are both a network that consists of all of the folks in this room and many, many other people, actually hundreds of public sector, nonprofit, utility, business, and higher education partners, working collaboratively to achieve Vermont's climate and energy commitments. And then we are also, the second thing we are is a small nonprofit organization with a mission to ensure that Vermont makes evidence-based energy and climate decisions that are grounded in high-quality data and analysis and collaboratively developed for effective and durable progress. Both as a network and as a nonprofit, we are non-advocacy and nonpartisan. We welcome open dialogue. There may be some suggestions here from the stage today about legislative or policy options. Those represent the speaker and not EAN as a whole, obviously. So we're very excited about this panel tonight. And why this topic? So it isn't a secret that Vermont is in need of more housing for the population who live here. We have a handout which is not made by EAN, it is made by VHFA, but this is part of a 4-page overview that they put together of their Vermont housing needs assessment. Don't read the whole thing right now, you can read it later, but we did want you to have sort of a little bit of the background information. In the Vermont Housing Needs Assessment, they make the claim that Vermont is likely to need an additional 24,000 to 36,000 homes by 2030 to combat tight home sales and rental markets. It would be a rather large increase. Vermont currently has about 335,000 homes and has only been adding about 1,200 new units recently. But given EAN's mission, we knew EAN network members would be interested to discuss how any increase in new construction could be clean, energy efficient, cost effective, and equitable. And we'd all be interested in knowing more of the challenges and benefits to doing that work well. So when we were thinking about this topic, and who we wanted to hear from, we knew we wanted to hear about both single-family and multifamily buildings. And I'm going to refer to a graph that's on the second page of this handout at the top. There's a line graph there. Because in the past decade, the number of permits for multifamily building units in Vermont has not been that much lower than for single-family units. They're fairly similar. So we need to look at both sides of that equation. And I also wanted to point out that at the very bottom of that page, I added to the VHFA 2-pager here some web links. One is to a link to where you can just get more information on the Vermont Housing Needs Assessment, and the other one is to the housingdata.org website, which for people who really like diving into the data is a fun website. Definitely recommend that you go there. So that's why we wanted to cover this topic. In terms of the structure of the event for this evening, we have invited each of our panelists here to give a 5 or 7 minute intro to some of their thoughts about the topic and their expertise on the topic, and then we will dive into some more conversation. We'll have some questions, we'll have Q&A. I did want to thank Bob, who is videoing this conversation, and just point out that there will be a video of the conversation if you care about what is said being videoed. And I'm going to give the briefest of brief introductions to our 4 panelists. So Richard Fazy, sitting beside me from Energy Futures Group. Richard has done many amazing things in his career. I get to work with him regularly because he's one of the co-chairs of the Weatherization at Scale Coalition and has been for all the years I've been at EAN and is fabulous to work with. Li-Ling Young from Efficiency Vermont, a senior energy consultant. We're super glad to have her expertise on this panel. Specifically looking at single-family homes, although she has expertise in many things about building, and we're glad to have her in the state as well as on the panel. Oh, and I should have mentioned that we invited Richard here particularly because of his expertise on codes and code compliance, but also just general expertise. Then we will have Kathy Beyer, who is from EverNorth, Senior Vice President. I always love chatting with Kathy because she has such a thoughtful and realistic analysis of energy equity issues in particular, and is very articulate on that and the needs for multifamily affordable housing. And Bob Duncan, this is the first time I'm actually meeting him in person, but he has been recommended as an excellent architect who does very high performance buildings in the multifamily market. So I'm excited to hear from all of these folks. We're going to give everyone 5 to 7 minutes, and then we'll have some Q&A and discussion.
Great. Thanks, Cara, and welcome everybody. Thanks for coming out on this beautiful day. Appreciate that. So we were asked to address the question of how to ensure that Vermont's housing stock, new construction, is clean, energy efficient, cost effective, and equitable. And I think the answer is pretty simple. We could require that all new construction be all electric and at least built to the energy code. RBs or CBs, Residential Building Energy Standard, or Commercial Building Energy Standard. Clean, if we build it all electric from the start, we don't have to retrofit it later. Energy efficient, we've got pretty good energy codes, so or better through some of the higher standards for Efficiency Vermont's above code program. But energy efficient, we got the know-how for that. Cost effective, equitable, do both of the above. But it's not really as simple as doing that. So I'm going to provide a little perspective on the building code side of the conversation and share some of the, sort of group my thoughts into successes, challenges, and then opportunities just to start the discussion here. So some of the successes. Vermont has a stated goal in our 2022 Comprehensive Energy Plan to achieve net zero ready construction for all newly constructed buildings by 2030 through building energy standards. So that's state policy. It's not in statute, but it is the state plan. So we're nearly there, really, with our energy codes, with RBs and CBs, which are some of the most stringent in the country. We have many highly trained and qualified professionals and networks of design professionals, trades, builders, certified energy professionals in the field with really strong understanding of building science and energy efficiency. We've got engaged energy efficiency utilities, EEUs, and the programs that they run, led by Efficiency Vermont. Our codes have done a great job at setting a relatively high bar with robust levels of insulation, very tight construction, mechanical ventilation systems now being required, encouraging heat pumps in all electric construction, and addressing EV charging, renewable ready, embodied carbon, efficient appliances, and more. Our affordable housing, as we'll hear about from Kathy and Bob, is really exceeds our even these levels. The legislature and the Office of Professional Regulation, or OPR, have put in place recently, as part of trying to address our code compliance issues, a contractor registry for residential contractors. We have 2 new construction-focused training centers. The Association of Building Contractors, or ABC of Vermont, has just opened a new contractor training center in Winooski, and the Office of Economic Opportunity has a weatherization training center that will soon open in Beyer. And then we have an active working group that's been working on energy codes for quite a few years. The Act 47 of 2023 had 20 recommendations that came out of that, many of which have been addressed that are putting into place. The Act 151 started last year and goes through this year. Has an energy study code committee that focuses on that as well too. So a lot of success stories out there, but we also have a lot of challenges. And the primary challenge is that Vermont is at less than 50% compliance with RBs and most single-family homes. Not a very good rate there. We're seeing more and more buildings with building science failures. The moisture management is not always understood by the construction industry and the people who put the buildings together. We're still putting fossil fuel systems in our new buildings. We have many builders that don't even know that we have an energy code. In fact, we've been at this since 1997 and still run into the builders that don't realize There's no statewide agency designated as the authority having jurisdiction, or AHJ. So that is, there's no single state agency that's in charge of statewide codes. Well, beyond that too, we have no statewide building code for single-family owner-occupied buildings. Many states, most states have their energy code embedded into a statewide building code. We don't have that. So that's really a significant failing. And we really don't have any statewide code enforcement mechanism. So, thus, our less than 50% compliance rate with our RV's energy code. CV's on the commercial side is doing better, about 87%. There's usually a professional involved with that, architect, engineer, others that want to make sure that their license and their reputation is on the line for those. And we have challenges with housing affordability, including how to pay for technical assistance and the higher upfront costs of making our buildings better. So a list of challenges, but opportunities as well. We as I mentioned, we've got great codes to start with. We've made great progress with OPR's contractor registry. It's on track to including a recognition of RV's informed contractors as part of that registry. We've got the Act 151 Building Codes Working Group that's continuing its work. We've been the recipient of a DOE grant along with Energy Futures Group, along with VEIC, Efficiency Vermont, for as long as the funding lasts from DOE, which we're not too hopeful that we've got a lot of training to do as part of the second phase of the grant. So we're hoping that continues. And we still have a lot of more work to do, and expect an increase in our energy code compliance. The builder training that we have lined up, a lot more training needs to happen. Circuit riders, we've now got under the DOE grant a couple people whose job, Lee Ling is helping with this as well too, be out there in the field working with builders and designers. We really need to do work on providing savings to the energy efficiency utilities, savings for attribution for supporting the code compliance work. We need to establish policy that allows the EUs to claim energy savings for increasing code compliance, because without an incentive for them to support the new construction world, there's not an incentive for them to keep supporting this industry. The Division of Fire Safety is working on a centralized database of permits. It would be great to include the CVs and RV certificates as part of that. They are open to that conversation. And last but not least, by naming the Division of Fire Safety as the authority having jurisdiction, we finally have a single agency in charge of energy codes. So, long list, but we've made some good progress, and we have a lot more longer ways to go.
Wow, my head is just full of all of that stuff. I don't know if there's room for my comments in my head. So Richard has really laid out some important assets that Vermont has on our way to making all our new homes energy efficient and powered by clean energy and cost effective and equitable. And so we have the pieces in place, but how do we put them in play? And two things that Richard mentioned that I want to particularly highlight are technical assistance and training. We're asking people to change their business as usual. We're asking developers and builders to implement new techniques and really to care about some new things that maybe they weren't in the center of their sites for a long time. And we're asking architects and engineers to consider new design objectives, right? So healthy homes, airtight buildings, how to create comfort with heat pumps. So to make that change, we're changing from business as usual. To make that change happen fast, right? We don't really have generations more time to figure this out. Our goal is for all our new construction to be net zero capable by 2030. So that's right around the corner. So we need this to happen fast. And these folks need support. They need the technical support. And there needs to be education in high performance construction. Now, I'm going to talk about high performance construction because energy efficiency, to me, is part of a constellation of things that we're really trying to achieve. And a high performance in encompasses a lot more than just energy efficiency. So it's about the durability of our buildings. It's about the healthfulness of our buildings, the comfort within our buildings. The knowledge sharing needs to be facilitated so we can all learn faster and from each other's successes and, when we miss the mark. So expert guidance in effective strategies for high performance construction. And actually that piece is in place too. So Efficiency Vermont, we've been there for 25 years, and I've been there for all of them. During that time, I have been able to see that high performance design has taken it now much more prevalent. The trades throughout the construction industry, so I'm talking about even like sheetrockers, electricians, plumbers, they all know that they have a role to play in making more high performance buildings. And that's really extraordinary. 20 years ago, we couldn't say that here, and in other parts of the country, we still can't say that. The sheetrockers don't know that they actually are part of making an airtight building. The plumbers don't know that making a plumbing layout that conserves water also saves energy. Efficiency Vermont's role has been that we've set standards, and then project by project, we've guided teams to meet that higher standard, and we're still doing it. So it's my estimation that we have the most airtight buildings in the country, new construction. What do you think? Oh, I got a nod. Yeah. So because I've been testing buildings for 25 years, and the airtightness is really extraordinary, both in single family and in multifamily. And when I go to other places around the country, talk to colleagues around the country, go to conferences, people are astonished. So we've had a lot of success with that. And it's about training, educating, giving people an opportunity to get feedback on what they're doing and what's been successful, sharing, insights from one project to another project, facilitating that communication between design professionals. So let's see, and this is all the result of, for 25 years, Efficiency Vermont has been pulling in the same direction. And actually, we have our builders and our developers and contractors and design professionals all pulling in that same direction too. So it's been just a very consistent effort. So Efficiency Vermont is really available to anyone in Vermont to discuss their project and provide expert advice. We hold a conference every year, educating on high performance construction, and we have ongoing technical trainings through our network, but actually you don't even have to be in the network to attend those. They're online, they're free. So all this education stuff, is it enough? Well, most of our buildings are not meeting their applicable code, their energy code. So it's not enough, but from where I sit, really the education piece is what's going to push us forward. And then for the affordability piece, the main thing that I want to say about that is, so with my Efficiency Vermont hat on, I will just say that there are some technologies that are really promising on the affordability side, particularly off-site construction, so things like modular or panelized construction. Just an example of kind of a new cool thing is that there's an outfit in Maine that makes insulation from raw wood fiber, and it's carbon sequestering, and it's domestically made, and it's a high performance insulation. So there are new technologies out there that are promising on the affordability front, but I really want to challenge you all to think about how much should our housing cost? Because it does a lot for us. It shelters us, but it's also our sanctuary. If you consider the homeless population throughout the country, you see that having enough housing is really important for the stability of our communities and for people's self-respect and how we view each other. And so if housing is expensive, how do we know when it's too expensive? Who really should be paying for our housing if we expect it to house people for generations. So I don't want to support the idea that our housing should be cheap, but I'm not really sure how much our housing should cost and how we decide when it's too much.
Well, that's a tough act to follow. I know a lot of you, and I think a lot of you know that EverNorth is a nonprofit housing developer that works actually in Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont, and I can agree that our energy code openly exceeds, I know, New Hampshire, and I believe Maine's energy code. We have 35 years of history of building either new construction or renovating over 7,000 apartments, and we have really, from the beginning, have always taken a role of leadership in energy efficiency, working with architects like Bob's firm and always with Efficiency Vermont on our buildings. And I just want to add to what you were saying that it really takes an ecosystem to get to a high performance building, and that's one of the things we are able to do because there is an ecosystem like that in Vermont among commissioning agents for use, among committed design professionals and committed contractors who will really pay attention to the details and the drawings. And as a result, we have a building in Burlington 2 years ago that was recognized by the Federal Department of Energy as one of the receiving an award for such a high performing thermal shell. So we know we can do it, and I'm going to focus on multifamily housing, but as Kara pointed out, we need about 30,000 new homes by 2030, and that means not just multifamily housing, right? We need housing of all sizes, small, medium, maybe large, and of all housing types. And I encourage you, for those I know a lot of you are work in your communities, and to be that voice in your community of saying, yes, we need more housing in our community. I also want to just stress in this conversation that we're going to be having, multifamily buildings are very different from a single-family building. I'll touch upon that a little bit, but they are a different building type in many ways, and they have more occupants, which is obvious. So I do want to just mention one of my favorite buildings, which I think you might be able to see if you looked out the back door, which is Taylor Street, which we worked on with Down Street, in partnership with Down Street, and then the city of Montpelier. And, Taylor Street is electrified for heating and cooling. It was actually one of the first buildings we used air source heat pumps on. But I want to point out one other aspect that we're not going to talk about much today, but the transportation efficiency of Taylor Street is awesome, right? And when not only does it have a multimodal transit center, but when we build in downtowns, our residents some of them don't have cars, and it's documented that when you build in a downtown village center, that the people living there drive significantly less than some of us who might live farther out. So that's one big step, and that is, I believe, transportation is responsible for about 30% of our greenhouse gas, or somewhere in there. So when we can do that, we've made progress. So Taylor Street was one of our first electrified buildings, and we were a little bit of slow adopters, talking with Efficiency Vermont about transitioning to cold climate air source heat pumps. We wanted to see how they performed, but now we have 8 new construction projects under construction, 266 apartments, and all 8 buildings are utilizing heat pumps, or in one case, a geothermal system. In fact, we're bringing online a second geothermal system quite soon. I want to recognize Jess Newbelt from EverNorth, because she has both of those projects, and you should really talk with her if you want to hear more about that. But before we dive into the electrification, which is kind of the, let's talk about decarbonization, so we're going to talk about electrification. Really, the most important investment to pay attention to in your multifamily building, and probably single family, I assume as well, is your air sealing. And that may sound boring, but you are, when you work with your design team, when you work with Efficiency Vermont, when you have a contractor who's really committed to it, when you pay for a commissioning agent to make sure the shell is actually performing the way it was designed, our buildings are consistently exceeding the standards for passive house, consistently. And they're built to Efficiency Vermont's high performance standards. And why I'm proud of that is, you know, that investment in the thermal shell, we're not going to touch it again for 30, 40, 50 years, right? It's the hardest thing to get back to. So getting that right the first time is really important. And when we combine the high performance shell with heat pumps and as many solar panels as we can possibly get, our buildings are, I have a new term, our buildings are achieving what I would call damn near net zero. And we ought to be celebrating it because we are very close to our 2030 goal of net zero already. So in some ways, I was like, I know, like you are all, you know, anxious, so we're not doing enough. We need to do more for climate solutions, but we also should you know, be proud of some of the things we are accomplishing. And in fact, one great example is, I don't know if many of you know about the apartments we're building up at the Berlin Mall. It's called Fox Run. It's 30 apartments, so by electrifying that building, we will be offsetting 83 tons of carbon annually. But we're doing it. I have to, true confessions, we have not been electrifying our domestic hot water in most of our buildings. Not because we have not found the technology that we has been reliable or cost effective. We continue to work on it. We've got a couple of systems, and again, we don't want to dive into the deep end of the pool until we know that we have one that works. And this is where the difference between multifamily buildings and single family really shows. I mean, I bet some of you have a single family home with a heat pump for hot water, but in a multifamily building, you've got, like, you know, I always say it's the teenagers. Like, it's the teenagers who all want to take a shower at, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and you can't tell them to take a turn. And so in a multifamily building, you have to plan for that. So the technology, just in my opinion, isn't quite there yet, but we're trying to get there. I'd like to, as Cara mentioned, I have been spending time in this policy space called energy equity, and Energy Action EAN has done some great work in their 2024 report. There's some great discussion about energy equity, and not surprising, low and moderate income Vermonters have a energy burden that's much higher than the rest of us. Their energy burden is 3 times higher than kind of the median income household. So when we're in this space of looking at a clean energy future, we also need to make sure that we're not increasing that energy burden on low and moderate income households, and that in this transition to the clean energy future, we're not leaving them behind. And how we do this is complex, and it touches many areas of policy. But in terms of greenhouse gas reduction in housing, we really need to make sure we're asking the 2 questions at the same time as how we are addressing the climate crisis and how we're addressing the housing crisis, and in an equitable fashion. So what that means to me is kind of what Laylee left off with. Well, what is the appropriate cost? That when we are looking at this, we're looking for cost-effective solutions where we can also build more housing, right? So that's the challenge that we have in front of us today, where we try to look at the intersection of the housing crisis and the climate crisis.
Thank you. So I'd like to talk about 4 basic topics in this conversation. One is context, another is to just talk about complexity of construction, lessons from the past, and building for the future. So, as I'm sure it is for you, the irony is not lost on me that today's Earth Day, and we're having a conversation about building for the future and how to do that equitably on Earth Day at the same time. And our national administration is basically tearing apart every progress we've made since 1970. So I think it's almost like I need to ask a moment of silence for that, to just think about that. But also, I want to talk a little bit about, in the opening description of today's discussion, it's called Building for the Future. And while we consider building for the future and how we do that, and how we afford to do that and everything else, we also have to be very mindful of not tearing down what's happened, what progress we've made in the last 55 years, if we want to look at 1970 sort of a starting point for thinking about energy and efficiency in buildings. And the last part of today's discussion is ensuring new housing is clean, energy efficient, and cost effective. I really want to encourage all of us to support our congressional delegation as they try to work hard on our behalf, on everybody's behalf in Congress, to not let happen what's purported to be happening in Washington. So I think I'm getting on my political soapbox there, but it's part of the conversation about how we build for the future, is we can't destroy what progress we've made in the past. So I also want to talk a little bit about, because not everyone is aware of the complexities and in fact contradictions in construction. That's borrowing a term from Robert Venturi and his writing to Scott Brown, complexity and contradiction. But when a developer such as EverNorth comes to us, or a private developer, or a single-family homeowner, and has an idea for something they want to build, that kernel, that idea has to go through an incredible array of acronyms to become a place where someone can live in comfort and joy. And I'm talking about the CDO, and I'm talking about the DRB, and I'm talking about the DAB, and I'm talking about the IRC, and the IBC, and the FBA, and so on and so on. We have so many things that come into play as we design buildings, and the energy code is just like one little piece of it, an incredibly important piece, but one little piece of this incredibly complex system that we have to bring housing, whether it's single-family housing or multifamily housing, to fruition. And that complexity is something that begins to inform how much things cost. So we've had, we're building now at costs that we've never seen before in any boom cycle of any economy I've ever been involved with in the last 50 years. The costs that we're seeing today far outstrip anything we've ever seen before. It has to do with labor shortages, it has to do with people retiring, it has to do with cost of financing, it has to do with zoning requirements and building code requirements, energy code requirements, and all of those things conspire to make buildings more complex and harder to build. So that's just a little bit of background for where we are, even though we have some of the most advanced energy codes in the state. As Richard said, we don't have a building code. So there's a lot of things that go wrong, even a single-family home. It doesn't get looked at in Vermont. And especially as we begin to develop more strict energy codes that involve more building science, we have to educate the people who did that. And Lily mentioned it, and one of the things in my comments is we need to know that sheetrockers know what air sealants are about, and we need to know that people who install exterior siding know that the previous 5 steps to air sealing that sheathing and putting on the insulation and putting on the rain screen and all those steps are in place before they start nailing the siding in place. And that's all part of education, and which is, we'll get to in a minute in terms of the future of building. And a little bit in terms of lessons from the past. So I'm old enough to have been in this business long enough to remember that we thought it was a really big deal to change our wood framing from 2x4 to 2x6, and get R19 in a wall, put R38 in the ceiling. And in 1974, we kind of thought that was the be-all and the end-all. By Jesus, if you got that right, you pretty much got everything right. And see how far we've come in terms of understanding building science. But and there is, largely due to the efficiency of Vermont's work, there is a much larger cadre of workers in the state who know how to build, but there's still a lot of people who don't. And it's really important that we begin to address that. I think that in the history of our work, both in single family, but primarily in multifamily development, we've seen Efficiency Vermont as a great partner. And for the longest time, Efficiency Vermont had this program called High Performance Guidelines that Billy alluded to. Those High Performance Guidelines were an encouragement to go beyond the code. And we were fortunate to have clients, both nonprofit and for-profit, who wanted to go beyond code because they saw the value of that investment in the building that's going to last for 50 or 75 or hopefully 100 years. And now that the code has advanced to the minimum of what used to be high performance, then those incentives don't exist or don't exist in the same way that they used to exist. So that's another piece of the puzzle that makes construction a little bit more expensive than it was 3 years ago, because the incentives to go beyond code aren't there. So we need to think about how, as a state, we can still encourage the development of all of our housing to be that high performance and beyond high performance and beyond code. Because, as I think everyone knows, code, whether it's fire code or building code or energy code, is always a minimum. It's never a maximum. It's always, you must do at least this. Not that you can do this, you must do at least this, but you can always do more. So in terms of building for the future, I think one of the most critical things is the education training. People have talked about that. And Richard mentioned that there are 2 new training centers opening up. It's so critical that we have that. At the same time, it's really critical, I think, as a culture, that we begin to respect people who work with their hands in a way that we haven't respected in the past. And that there is actually not only some value, there's a lot of value in what people can bring to a job site and what they learn. And it's more than just working with their hands, because now, more so than ever, they have to work with their brains. And so that's part of the education piece of it. And that goes to our technical centers at our high schools, that goes to training centers, that goes to union halls and apprenticeship programs, and any other way that we can do this. But we really have to have a very educated workforce. And it is, I think, important for us to adopt a statewide building code. I know that the governor opposes this. I know there are legislators that are not in favor of it. I know it seems bureaucratic. I know that we're a Yankee can-do state and we don't want to have somebody tell us what to do. But the meeting of building science and construction is so different now and has been for the last 15 or 20 years than it was in my dad's time or our parents' time or even earlier in my career. It's so important that people know what they're doing. And the cost to have a system in place that can enforce that is far less costly on the front end than it is to fix a building that's going to last for 50 or 75 years and has problems at year 5 with moisture, mold, and so on, or siding's rotting off in 15 years because the moisture system is not working, the rain screen, whatever. So it's so critical that we have that, and we need to come to an understanding as a state how important that is. I also am going to go out a little bit on a limb here and sort of reiterate a little bit what Kathy was alluding to. And I think we have to, as a culture, not only in Vermont, but nationwide and beyond, to rethink the importance of single-family housing as our solution for housing. As Kathy mentioned, the energy consumption of a multifamily building on a per square foot basis, per occupant basis, is dramatically less than the energy consumption even in a net zero building. It's just simple math. There's less wall space, there's less roof space, there's less foundation space. All those things conspire. It's easier to air seal, and so on and so forth. All those things conspire to make multifamily housing more efficient from an energy point of view. It's also more efficient from a transportation point of view. When Kathy was talking about that, I was reminded we did a building actually with EverNorth. It was called Housing North at the time in St. Albans, and they had a document with the ZBA, the CDO. Their CDO said you could have 2 parking spaces for every apartment in a downtown village building. We argued and argued and argued with them, and they wouldn't back off on that. And
We have too
built
much parking.
So they have too much parking. We actually built a parking garage with 2 spaces per every housing unit, and it's never, to my knowledge, ever once been full. So we have to have that understanding that there's some common sense that has to be applied, and I think we have to make some changes in some of our ordinances. But I think perhaps the most significant obstacle to building for our future is the cost of construction. And that involves funding availability, it involves financing, it involves all sorts of things. It involves thinking about housing, the buildings that we build, and how long they last. And we have a system in this country that's based on a mortgage that's typically 30 years, get my 30 years in, I'm only going to pay for that, and this thing's mine. Other countries in the world think things differently. They have longer mortgages, or in fact, in some countries, like in Switzerland, they don't have mortgages. You don't pay off your house. You pay interest for as long as you live, and you pay it 1 to 1.25%. You have a variable interest rate loan. It might be 0.75%. It might be 1.5%. But you will pay that forever. And in the long run, as it's been explained to me, that allows for people to do things like finance their retirement with that savings over the course of a loan. It allows them to finance a business. It allows a different way to think about things. So I think in our country we have to think about different ways of financing. We also have to engage the banking industry. We ask developers to pony up to build inclusionary housing, though it costs the same amount of money to build an inclusionary unit as it does to build a market rate unit. We ask developers to take money out of their pocket to do that. Maybe they make enough to do that. I don't know. I don't want to judge that. But it seems to me the banking industry has never been asked to come up to the table, belly up to the bar, and drop a point off their rate, or somehow build into the mortgage the additional energy efficiency you want to have. So I think there's some questions there that we can be asking in the greater context of society.
My brain's full. I'm going to open it up for some questions. Is there anyone in the audience who'd like to ask a question? I see someone in the way back. So the question, just in case people can't hear, is how long have we been building near net zero houses? When did that transition start to happen?
It's on a continuum. I mean, there were near net zero houses built 30 years ago. Not very many. There are probably some people here I see who live in 50 years ago. Yes. Probably not very many. And there's still a lot out there now that have a ways to go. So I don't know. Do you have an answer?
Well, so cold climate heat pumps were really the breakthrough, right? Because if we're still burning fuels, it's very hard to, with a straight face, claim that we're zero anything. So cold climate heat pumps have been around for about 15 years. When was the first fully electrified building?
About 5 years ago.
Yeah, so about 5 years ago on the multifamily side. And really what Richard said is that our codes are now pretty much where they need to be. Like the codes have been on a tear to increase their stringency for probably 10 to 15 years, like a real consistent pace, getting more and more stringent. But we're kind of getting to the point where we're like, okay, this is about where we need to be to meet our state's goals. Now that doesn't mean that there've been a lot of buildings built to that code yet, but because of the impact of efficiency in Vermont, there have been a lot of people building in advance of the codes for, well, let's see, our high performance home standard was established maybe 12 years ago, something like that.
2012, something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that we've had fully electrified and maybe like renewable energy single family homes for a little bit longer than 5 years, maybe looking back 10 years. And I actually haven't worked on a fuel fire project in at least 5 years. So it hasn't been that long, but we have the pieces in place, the code, and the technologies.
Right, I think I saw Jared.
Thank you for calling me on the camera. So, one of the really striking things to me, and I think really encouraging things to me, in looking at as you set out the context for what Vermont's housing looks like now and where we're trying to go, is that I think it's trying to interpret the VHFA data. It looks like about 80% of Vermont homes are single-family homes, and about 20% are multifamily. But in terms of what's being built new, it's about 50-50. And that seems really encouraging to me for the reason that you all said, and you ended on this, Bob, the efficiency advantages of multifamily buildings in terms of lower energy use in the building shell, the embedded carbon, the transportation efficiency, especially when those are located in downtowns and population centers. But one of the things that we didn't talk about in our preparatory call, but I want to spring on you now because it just came to mind, is an efficiency advantage in terms of one of the things I've heard, and I don't have the data behind this, and it can't back it up. But I want to throw it out there to see if it's a hypothesis that resonates with you, is that I've heard that Vermont has one of the lowest occupancy rates per person per square foot. That we have a lot of older, bigger buildings that few people are living in. I think that that's probably related to having an older population and empty nesters and older single adults or couples who are living in spaces that could have accommodated a family, 10, 20 years ago. And I've also seen in surveys that a lot of those folks say that they would like to move into a smaller space, but they're not available or they're not affordable. And so it seems to me that there's this additional efficiency advantage of building more multifamily housing in Vermont to the extent that it could open up opportunities for folks who are, one or two people in a large house to downsize and then free up that space for more people to live in it. So I'm just wondering if you think that's correct, and B, if you can talk about these kind of multiple efficiency advantages of new multifamily construction versus single family construction, how we incentivize that even more.
You follow me?
Yeah.
That's a good question, Jared. I don't know that there's actual data on do people move out. It's such a personal choice,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
What's the right size home for me? Which
Yeah.
is why I said we need homes of all sizes,
Yeah.
because we can't dictate what this is the right size home for you. I have noticed, and this is again anecdotal, when I drive around Chittenden County, the newer homes are getting smaller, and I know it's because of construction costs. Like, one thing good about construction costs is the builders are finally building smaller homes, which I do think is actually something people want. Multifamily housing is just that's a different life choice.
Yeah.
Is that what I want to live in? And particularly, I think depends on what region of Vermont you're in.
Yeah.
As to, although I can't help but tell stories. Real estate developers love to tell stories. I was in downtown Rutland Friday, and this woman who was living in a single family home in Rutland, she's like, "Oh, I have to show you my new place in downtown Rutland." And she takes me into her condo right in the heart of downtown Rutland. It was beautiful, absolutely beautiful. So maybe there are more opportunities there, but we do have I think one of the oldest housing stock in the country. So that's a challenge we're always going to be facing, is that old housing stock that's leaky and probably more square footage than people need. I'm sure Bob has something to say.
I don't have a silver bullet. I can tell you that the question you asked is a question that my wife and I discuss probably 5 times a week. We are fortunate to live in a house where we have about 950 square feet per person. There's 2 of us. That's more space than we need. We could live in something smaller. There aren't options out there for us. For good or bad, we wouldn't qualify for a subsidized affordable senior unit, many of which I've designed. And we can't afford to do something that would be moving Camden Rise and spend $1.2 million on an 800 square foot apartment. So it's a difficult nut to crack. And I remember, just anecdotally, Cathedral Square, a nonprofit developer of senior housing, was proposing to build some housing in the north end of Burlington. And one of the things they did was assess neighbors, like, would you move here? And a number of neighbors said, yeah, we'd like to do that. What held them back was, for whatever reason, they didn't want to rent. They wanted to own. And some of that has to do with taxes. Some of it has to do with what the government would take for nursing home contributions. So it's a complicated problem. If you're sitting on cash, you've got to pay for the nursing home. If the cash is in your house, you may not have to pay as much for the nursing home. So like everything else, there's so many complexities to all these questions, but I think we're not going to get anywhere unless we talk about them. I think it's important to have that conversation.
I just want to add one more thing about starter housing. Like multifamily, 1 or 2 bedroom apartments. We really have a worker shortage in Vermont, and it's actually the worst here of anywhere in the country. Like, it's sort of hitting the highlights for a lot of different statistics here. But young people coming to this state cannot find affordable housing. I mean, it's kind of like you go to college, you come out with a lot of debt, you're really trying to establish your career, and you need to live in a house with 3 other people just to afford your housing. It's just not an attractive housing situation. So more affordable housing, I think, makes it more attractive for young workers too.
Bill and then
I have questions about the multifamily housing for anyone. I'm interested in how you meter the power, whether the tenants have their own meter or you have a house meter. Let's use an example, a 20 unit. And then I'm wondering about how tenants and the house can employ conservation techniques such as controlling their thermostat and domestic hot water. I mean, one of the successes the high performance buildings often is the people who live in it and the controls they have. So how the meters are, how the controls are, and how conservation can come into lifestyle.
do you think you could repeat it for the correct?
Yeah, so the question is about how multi-unit buildings work in terms of the utilities and having their individual controls within the units. Is that an okay
Well, no,
synopsis?
controls for conservation.
Controls for conservation.
Because to me, controls are close to 50% of net zero buildings.
So interestingly, by switching to electrification for heating and cooling, we have also, in the past, we had tenants pay for their own apartment plug load. So they had a meter, but it was just for the lights and the cooking. But we think it's important that the owner, pays for the heating and cooling because we want to avoid the split incentive problem that's like one of the worst energy efficiency non-policies in the world, right? When the owner of the building doesn't pay for the heat and the cool. So when we switched to air source heat pumps, we also put the tenant's plug load on the house meter. And that means we can get solar, so we want to get as much solar as we can. And that is the only way to get the benefit of solar to the tenant's basically plug load for the apartment. So it's a fairly new thing that we've been doing. It's a great question. I don't have an answer on the conservation piece.
Do you know how individual unit plug load consumption has changed since you implemented that?
Meaning,
Are people consuming about the same per unit month, or are they maybe consuming more?
yeah.
Not feedback.
In the past, they were just paying like $40 a month for heating, for cooking and lights, it wasn't that much. Well, now what we've done is we've added air conditioning as included in your rent. And are people using more air conditioning? Anecdotally, yes. Actually, I think we have some data that backs that.
Jared, that's a really interesting question.
Do you want to?
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a very interesting question about all this existing extra square footage that's out there. I helped a friend who had a mold problem that resulted from a very well-intentioned nonprofit condoizing some older homes so people could afford to buy a condo in this old house, and they didn't deal with a moisture problem. And so it'll take a pretty comprehensive look at those old buildings, and I think if there were that ability to apply that kind of analysis you need to make sure you're doing a healthy, good thing with the building, and the building science is all good. And there were some big incentives that could say, hey, Bob, we'll come to your house, we'll figure it out for you, we'll design it, and this is what it could look like when you're done. And now you've got a 2-unit building, you can rent out half of it, and you can afford to stay in your home. And so there could be a lot of good ways to do this, but I think it would take a really comprehensive system and looking at it in order to make it work well. Oh, also I wanted to say one thing. I really want to thank Richard for his many years of fighting this building code battle. And we've had so many
What I do want to do is finish in a timely manner, and then there'll be more time for folks to chat if they want to. But what I wanted to finish with is, what gives you hope in terms of increasing our housing stock at this point in time? Or if there's anything else you want to reflect on in terms of what one another have said. I'm just going to give you a moment for some closing remarks, but I did want to, if you'd like to put a positive spin on it, invite them.
Sure. I guess I get inspired annually at Efficiency Vermont's Better Buildings by Design conference. I've gone to a lot of conferences over my career throughout the country, and nowhere else do we find more practitioners who understand building science, who are engaged in this conversation. They're not just thinkers or policy people or program people, but it's actually folks that are doing this on the ground in Vermont. We've got a tremendous network of professionals who know their stuff, and that encourages me.
So I'm going to refer to something that you brought up, Bob. I have seen in the last maybe year and a half a perceptible shift in the interest in entering the trades for young people. There's been a lot of rending of the clothes and sort of, oh, woe is me, about this, what was called at the time an impending crisis of people retiring out of the trades, and then it wasn't impending anymore. Then it was really oh my gosh, I really cannot find somebody to do this work. And everybody I know doing this work is 72 years old and really can't kneel anymore and doesn't really want to work 5 days a week anymore. And then there was we really hurt ourselves by telling young people to go to college when maybe there was a much faster path to sort of $80,000 a year income with no college debt. And why did we do that? But after going through all of that, I feel like I'm seeing a very consistent message sort of across the board that this is a great career. I'm hearing young people talk about being excited about the new technologies that can be maybe a carpenter using laser guided cutting for precision, whatever. I don't know what the technologies are in carpentry, but so it's not, they're not thinking back to oh, this is what my uncle used to do and his fingernails were always dirty. They're thinking I can see the things that I care about in this job. And so there's a lot of enthusiasm in entering the trades. And so it was a rough cycle, but we're kind of on the easy side now. It's getting easier anyway. And I put my faith in young people.
What gives me hope every single time is ribbon cutting when we get it's just such a joyful event, and these are homes. These are we call them apartments, but they're homes, and the people are so appreciative, and so we just need to have more ribbon cuttings.
I would agree with what everyone has said here. The change is perceptible that we're beginning to see in terms of expertise of people in trades and people wanting to join the trades. So there's hope there, and I'm hopeful that we're going to see some changes at a state level in terms of building code adoption and simplification of the process of how we enforce codes and how we bring up the education level of folks so that they know, the anecdote that I sometimes tell. I was doing a house remodel design for some old clients in the middle of the pandemic when no one could find anyone to build anything, and they found 3 contractors, and I did this little outline spec for them. And one of the first things I said is that all the work in this must comply with I guess it was the 20 Arby's at that time. All 3 of those builders said, "What's that?" And I think that's changing over time. So that's hopeful that that's changing over time, because we need to know that everybody has a stake in this. It's really important.
Just want to give another thank you to this excellent panel of speakers. So glad to be able to share a stage with them and to have them here. And we hope you'll stay for a few more minutes and chat with folks before we head out. Thanks for coming.